Larry Smith as sheriff. And I'm proud that we have a sheriff that says what he means and means what he says. And it's just straight out with it. Now I'm going to tell you that Larry's going to be making a presentation in Commissioner's Court on Tuesday for some changes he needs to make in the Sheriff's Department so that he can make good on his promises to the people of Smith County. Now Tuesday's not a day for you to go in there and speak, but I'm asking you if you're interested in the things that Larry Smith wants to do with the Sheriff's Department. Would you mind taking a little time out of your day on Tuesday and showing up at the Commissioner's Court meeting at 9:30? I will be over in the central jury room sitting there with all the people that are eager to be selected for jury duty. So I won't be there, but I know that Sheriff Smith would love to have some of the folks that supported him so much be in that courtroom, to just be there to say, we want to hear what Sheriff Smith has to say. Now, Larry, would you please, those in your administration that are here today, I see a lot of them, would you please introduce them if you weren't planning on? Would you please just do me a favor and do that? I'd like to recognize them. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanne. It's a pleasure being here to talk to y'all today. I haven't been attending out here very much. I've been a little busy. But first of all, I want to introduce, a lot of you know Fred, if you go and stand up, Chief Deputy Fred Little. A lot of y'all have already met Fred. And sitting there in front of Fred is Robert Carlson. Robert is another one of the Chief Deputies. He's kind of over the operations side of the house, and then Fred is over the jail and as he likes to say, everything else, which is quite a bit. I kind of divided the two chief deputies, what they do a little differently than the past administration did in order to get the span of control down to the lieutenants and sergeants where it needs to be. But Robert is everybody knows that Fred started working with DPS when they were riding horses still, giving tickets. Robert Carlson, I met Robert back in the 70s, I believe. And Robert's dad is a legend here with the Sheriff's Office. He retired from the Sheriff's Office, Gene Carlson. And Robert started here with the Sheriff's Office in 1977 and left and went to the Parks and Wildlife Department of the state of Texas. I first met Robert when he was a game warden in Longview. We worked a lot of different cases together, and he rose to the ranks of major in that Parks and Wildlife and recently retired. And so here he is, back where he started. Another individual I'd like to point out here, Kenneth Bibby, if you'll stand up. You constable out on the floor there. Kenneth and I have already gotten together and doing some things together and have a lot of plans for that part of the county here in the near future. But first of all, before I even get started on what I was going to talk about today, I'd like to bring y'all's attention back to probably about a year ago, you know, give or take a month. I'll give y'all a few kudos here before I get started. If y'all remember, y'all started the vetting process of the U.S. Senate. And we had, I think I went to probably 6 or 7 different debates at different times. And after y'all got finished with your vetting process, you picked a man that y'all got behind. He didn't win the first election, but he finally won the big one, the county. Yeah. And if y'all saw him on the news the other night talking about the Second Amendment, how he so eloquently stated, and where even a kindergartner could understand what the Constitution is all about and what gun control, why we don't need gun control in the United States of America. You should pat yourself on the back for sending that man to Washington, D.C. I'm going to start by telling you, I live in the city now, city of Tyler, have for a good while, but I was raised, born in Big Sandy, raised out in the country. Had my first BB gun when I was old enough to cock it where it would shoot. And then when I was old enough to graduate to a single shot rifle, I got a 22 Stevens single shot. A lot of you guys in here know what I'm talking about. Nothing better than going out there, walking up down the creek bank, shooting turtles and snakes and things like that, and smelling the gunpowder. Right? That's not just something that you could do just for hunting or whatever. That's not what the Constitution says. It's not what the second part of the Bill of Rights says. The Second Amendment. It was so important to our founding fathers that they made it the Second Amendment to the Constitution. So I wish, and now I'm really have a breath of fresh air, because I've said as late as the rally that they had out at Lock and Load, that I wish we had some congressmen and senators with enough gumption and enough forethought and to be able to project what would happen years and years and years after their death, after they've served the country. I think in Ted Cruz we have somebody like that. And I would love to see him in a debate with President Obama on the Second Amendment. But anyway, I've been in law enforcement 35 years. I know y'all have heard that whole story, most of you. I'm not going to go rehash any of that. But a lot of people, when I began running for office, thought I was suspect at least, or at best. Here we have a former federal employee, especially from the three-lettered agency that I retired from, ATF, which I tell all my friends at FBI and DEA, that means for always there first. Because a friend from the Drug Enforcement Administration was supposed to be here, the supervisor from local office, DEA, I can say this because I worked for them at one time too, that stands for don't expect anything. So, anyway, I had the luxury of spending 11 years at a sheriff's office, and then going to 2.5 years of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and then finally to ATF, where I had about a 22-year career. And I want to ensure you, number one, that, I hear a lot of, I'm a member of NRA, don't get me wrong, but, there after the Waco incident and all this, we had the Wayne LaPierre that called us a bunch of jackbooted thugs. I did away with my NRA membership for a while. I've got it back and have had it back quite some time. But anyway, I want you to know that there are a lot of people, friends of mine, people I've worked with, and I've worked with agents. ATF is not a very big agency. Number one, there's about 2,500 agents as opposed to FBI with about 15,000. DEA has probably about 12,000. So it's a very relatively small agency anyway, and I just want to ensure you that many of the men and women that I work for or work with in ATF think just like me. I think you will find it hard to believe, but I assure you that is exactly right. Where we need to focus at is talking to our legislators, our Congress, and the Senate, and that's where we need to aim everything. We're not doing any good by aiming it at ATF or pointing fingers there. We need to go to our representatives and let them know where we stand on gun control and things like that. And like I like to explain, when somebody used to mention gun control to me, I was a firearms instructor with ATF. And gun control to me is get the proper stance and the proper grip and make sure you hit what you're shooting at. And I think that's the only kind of gun control we should ever even have to talk about. But anyway, back February of last year, almost a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I, during the campaign, made a pledge to the citizens of Smith County, and I didn't think it was going to come into play as quick as it did right now. But I haven't changed my mind since I've done this pledge. The pledge is what it is. It's where I stand, and as Joanne told you, I pretty much, which some people like, some don't, tell you what I think, whether it's the popular thing to say or whatever. I believe it's to be the right thing to say, and I will always do what I think's right. But I'm going to read just a couple parts of the pledge, and I think it's on y'all's website. But First of all, start at the pledge part itself. I believe the county sheriff is the last line of defense between the federal government and the citizens of the United States. Therefore, if elected sheriff of Smith County, Texas, I, Larry R. Smith, pledge to the people of Smith County that I will at all times support and defend the people's liberties as defined by the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This strongly includes, but is not limited to, the First and Second Amendments. And I took an oath of office on 4 occasions that I can remember. Once going to work as a 20-year-old deputy sheriff in Gregg County, going to DEA, then ATF, and then when I was sworn in on the 1st of this year, January 1st of this year, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And I intended to do that at whatever cost. The other part I'd like to read to you that will give you a little bit of relief, I think, where you can see that the federal government, Big Brother, as they like to consider themselves, can't tell little brother, come here and tell us what to do. And that is in Mack versus United States, a Supreme Court ruling, and the opinion was written by Judge Scalia. I'm just going to read in part. Congress cannot compel the states to enact or enforce a federal regulatory program. Today we hold that Congress cannot circumvent that prohibition by conscripting the state's officers directly. The federal government may neither issue directives requiring the states to address particular problems, nor command the state's officers or those of other political subdivisions to administer or enforce a federal regulatory program. It matters not whether policymaking is involved, and no case-by-case weighing of the burdens or benefits is necessary. Such commands are fundamentally incompatible with our constitutional system of dual sovereignty, which I agree 100%. I'm going to talk a little bit, Doug talked a little bit about the prosecutor that was gunned down yesterday. And I'm not going to say much about it. I think you've already heard kind of what the public needs to know about it. But I will say, and I hate to use him as an example, he hadn't even been laid to rest yet. But he was not gunned down with an AR-15 or an assault weapon. He was gunned down, as many have been in these school shootings, the theater shootings, and everything like that, with regular pistols that we enjoy going out and target practicing with and shooting and things of this nature. I was with ATF during the first assault weapons ban. And if y'all will remember, during my campaign, I explained to y'all that ATF has 2 functions, or 2 different divisions. They have the Firearms Enforcement Division, and then they have the Arson and Explosives Enforcement Division. Because of the assault weapons ban, growing up like I told you I did, and enjoying firearms and everything all my life, I could not in good conscience do and enforce those laws, but I was already vested with the federal government at that time, had to support a family, had 2 children by then, and so what I did, and I thank God, I was able to transfer over to the Arson and Explosives Investigation portion of ATF, where I was finally retired from, which was the best move I've ever made. But anyway, to me, especially looking back on everything that the government's trying to do right now, it's kind of like I've been sent to college by having the 22 years with ATF I've had. It's kind of like I got to look at it from both sides. And it didn't work the first time, it won't work this time. But the thing about it is, you take I don't want to get too deep into this, but you take for instance, AR-15, if you want to talk about the magazine capacity, or you take a Mini 14, which is not banned, but the AR-15 is banned. Very little difference, same caliber firearm, same magazine capacity. You can take, if they limit it to 10-round magazines, which you can get a 30 now, you can even get more than 30. But if they limit it to 10-round magazine, many of you men in here were part of the Vietnam War. And thank you for your service, number one. But number two, what did y'all do when you had a magazine, even a 30 rounds, you took some tape and you taped one upside down, then you have 60 rounds. You're automatically going to have 20 rounds right out first rattle. It's an unenforceable law. And on top of that, you have magazines that they were trying to get us to go out here and enforce this law. You had to prove if the magazine was manufactured pre or post ban. Well, any magazine I ever saw doesn't have a serial number, doesn't have a manufacturer's date or anything on it. So again, it's unenforceable. It's ludicrous to even try to go down that road. Number one, that's not our problem. Again, I've been in pretty much every facet of law enforcement you can think of, mostly in the criminal investigation side, working homicides and violent crimes, drugs, and things of that nature. What my perception is that the federal government needs to do, other than getting out of the state's business, is, like Joanne hit on earlier, we need to get more money back, and I've heard her say this, I'm kind of stealing this from her a little bit. Instead of having to ask for our money back from them, it'd be best if we just keep some of it to start with.
That's right.
And use this to do the programs we need to do on a state level of doing the mental health programs we need for our citizens that are incompetent, mentally incompetent, and to do the drug programs we need to do, the drug enforcement, the drug law enforcement. About 85 to 90% of every violent crime has a direct nexus back to dangerous drugs, either methamphetamine, crack cocaine, or heroin. Just about 85 to 90% goes directly back. I've seen it time after time after time. If we had more money in law enforcement, especially in local law enforcement, to enforce those programs, right now, we're making progress on the local level here, but what we have to do is work in conjunction with our DPS counterparts and DEA counterparts that are locally here in Tyler. And if we take what we call a buy walk, we go spend your tax dollars to buy drugs with, but what we're using at the sheriff's office, I don't want to get y'all started. What we're using at the sheriff's office is money we've already taken away from them anyway. We're just buying it back from them. So we're using that money to make buys with. But we don't have unlimited resources, do we, Commissioner Nick? Commissioner Phillips, wherever he's at. But anyway, nor do we need to. We have things in place to do this. But my point is, if we were to go and do that by walk and arrest the person immediately, there's 20 to 30 to take that individual's place immediately once we take him down to Elm Street and book him in jail. That's not what we need to be doing. What we need to be doing is taking that, going farther, and if we don't have the local resources monetarily or manpower, is to work with our DPS counterparts and our DEA counterparts and take that on up the chain, which I've been fortunate to be able to do on numerous occasions with not only in local law enforcement, but with DEA and ATF, and just go all the way up, because you got it like a snake. If you cut the head off, the snake's not going to do anything else. What we want to do is go past the user, the street level dealer, past the trafficker, all the way to the manufacturer, which, I'm going to hit another sore subject with y'all here, which it would very much so help if we get our borders closed. But anyway, things like that, if we were able to utilize our own money that we're having to send to Washington, D.C., and then kind of them give us allowance back like we're kids again, is to let the states police their own problems and things of that nature. And because what works for us here in East Texas may not work for somebody in Michigan or there's another place, there's somebody I think we know that's from Chicago. I think Chicago has the most stringent gun control laws of any city in the nation, along with Washington, D.C., which I think he's got dual residences. Both of them he's been at, one he's still at, and it doesn't work. They have the largest homicide rate. Chicago and Washington, D.C. have two of the largest homicide rates anywhere in the nation. So that should tell him right there it doesn't work. It's not the gun. I could have had a gun laying up here the whole time I've been talking. Unless one of you pick it up and misuse it, it's not going to hurt anybody. But just to talk a little bit about the AR-15, for instance, just because it's got a bayonet lug on it, or just because it may have some attachment on it, or it may have a different grip attachment added onto it, it doesn't make it any more or any less dangerous, but that's what they're using to make it illegal. And I will tell you from working gun-related offenses with ATF, and I can honestly tell you that I never arrested anybody that didn't need to be in the federal penitentiary with ATF. I can honestly say that. Now, I couldn't have said that if I wasn't able to transfer. Well, yeah, I could, because I wouldn't be there. But anyway, ATF's first gun laws were 922G of Title 18 United States Code. And that is use a felon, pretty much a short name of it is felon in possession of a firearm. And for the federal government to have a nexus or to have a violation of that law, it was and it still is that number one, if I catch somebody here in Tyler, Texas, that's a convicted felon with a pistol, number one, if that pistol was manufactured in the state of Texas, I know a lot of you don't know this, it's not a federal offense because it has not traveled in interstate or foreign commerce. That's how they got their foot in the door, is through interstate or foreign commerce. And the way you know how they are, you give them an inch, they take them out, they keep nipping away at it. And then they go to 924C of Title 18 United States Code, which is a good law, don't get me wrong, it's still a good law. It's using or carrying a firearm during relation to a drug trafficking crime. I used it, it's a great tool because it's the people that really need to be in the federal penitentiary. It goes back to the dangerous offenders that I was just talking about. But then they keep going and keep going and keep going, and then when they first had the first Brady bill and the first assault weapons bans, that's where they get out, as somebody y'all know, like to say, they get out in the weeds. And I'm probably getting ready to be told, quit getting out in the weeds, quit circling the airport and landing the plane probably, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And leave time for some questions. I'd be glad to answer any questions I could.
What about increasing the penalty for any crime in which a weapon is utilized?
The question was, what about increasing the penalty for crime where a weapon was utilized? I don't even think we have to go that far. I think what we need to start doing is enforcing the laws we already have, which aren't being enforced.
Sheriff, you need some water? Okay, first question. Do we have a large meth lab problem in Smith County and surrounding counties? And if so, how do you find and bust them?
Methamphetamine has come a long way. I can tell you back when I was still at the Sheriff's Office in Gregg County, we had methamphetamine labs everywhere. That's back when they had what they called a P2P method of manufacturing methamphetamine, or phenylpropanone. And it just so happens when I was with DEA, I was on a clandestine methamphetamine laboratory team, so I've been in many meth labs. And it has really changed over the years. Thanks to our federal government, I can say this because I was with DEA before, is that we would allow the importation of chemicals, precursor chemicals for methamphetamine, pseudoephedrine, which methamphetamine through a process can be extracted from. DEA was the biggest proliferator of that as anybody. If we didn't have enough manpower to watch, we would let loads of that pseudoephedrine walk. We knew where it was going. I worked in Denver, Colorado, in the mountains there. They'd have people come in from Oregon and California and manufacture methamphetamine. But it's changed. And that goes back, the federal government finally did wake up and say, hey, we're putting all this on the street. They changed it. And Where do you think the largest amount of methamphetamine comes from right now? Anybody want to guess? Exactly. Across the borders of Mexico, because they can still get the precursor chemicals. Another reason for closing our borders. But we do have what we call the Nazi cooks or whatever, the very small cooks where the reason when you go to the drugstore to get the good drugs with pseudoephedrine in them, you have to now... and you go ahead, you go by that, you have to go use your driver's license to get it from the pharmacy. That's the reason. They go by what the methamphetamine manufacturers are doing is stealing these blister packs of pseudoephedrine and extracting the methamphetamine out of them. But we do have a big problem with methamphetamine here. It's been here a long time, and I'll tell you from growing up with and working different criminals, in my start of law enforcement is about the time I came there when the generation of methamphetamine, when it started. And the people that you see after they start using methamphetamine are not anywhere close to the same person you see before. So that's a big problem. I get in the weeds a little bit.
I will withhold judgment right now, Sheriff. Has Smith County been federalized by the Sheriff's Department's acceptance of federal surplus equipment? And we might as well go ahead and throw in the grants, because I get this question all the time, Sheriff. So, have we been federalized?
Well, the grants, like I said earlier, I'd be more than happy to take some of the money back from them that we gave them to start with. But no, we haven't been federalized, nor will the Sheriff's Department under my administration be federalized. I'm not going to owe one thing for accepting any grant, which I haven't accepted yet. But in the surplus, I haven't accepted any surplus. Matter of fact, I'm getting ready to get rid of, y'all know them as Bubba 1 and Bubba 2, I think, the APCs that they have there. I think they've served their usefulness. But we just, the other day, it's strange you bring this up, the other day, we're still finding things rat holed in different locations from the surplus. We found, I think, 150, 160 brand new sleeping bags down in the Carlton Hotel that have been rat holed back there from the previous administration. And I won't, we're going to stay in a motel if we have to go out of town or something. I'm not going to use a sleeping bag.
Were drugs responsible for the mass school shootings?
Drugs are in some way responsible for some of the school shootings. When I worked for ATF, I worked on 2 school shootings that drugs were indirectly tied to, but not all of them. Some of the school shootings, the Virginia Tech shooting was a mental health, a person that was under the care of a psychiatrist or psychologist, so not all of them.
That was about prescription drugs and stopping the use of them.
So I can take that as your question?
Yes. Yes.
Prescription drugs?
Well, there's been some talk that a lot of these white, rich kids were taking, Ritalin or Paxil or whatever, and then they stop taking it and they go crazy.
Well, you have to wonder what they were taking it for before they started, maybe they had the underlying problem already. That's something I don't think we can completely say with 100% certainty that it is, but I think that goes directly back to a mental health issue to me, which I think what I would like to see, rather than banning firearms or banning assault weapons, is to have something where if you have a psychologist or a psychiatrist that a person is under the care of, that we have a database somewhere that they can, while they're under their care, send their name and all their identifying information to until they get well and get better, that they can't legally anyway go purchase a firearm.
Approximately how many gun control laws are presently on the books?
Laws are executive order. The only one that is pertinent to the Smith County Sheriff's Office is the state statute of felon in possession of a firearm. And that's the only one we'll be enforcing.
Can you tell us anything about the possible motive of the assassins who killed the DA in Kaufman?
No, ma'am. until we know who it is, that'd be just,
Speculation.
right.
The Delaware Attorney General recently revoked the county sheriff's arrest authority. They want your comment on that. If the Texas Attorney General issued such an opinion, how would you respond? Well, first of all, he wouldn't and he can't. He doesn't have the authority.
Right.
So,
Well, Delaware has what, 4 counties, I think? 3? But I'm not even willing to give up 3 counties for doing that. I don't think it's just because anytime they get a toehold in there, they're gonna go after more and more. I think it's a bad precedent to set. I think, it's in our, state constitution that we have a sheriff, and again, that goes back to 2 separate sovereignties. We have our constitution, and then we have the national or United States Constitution, and I think that's the way it needs to stay.
related to the position taken by the Milwaukee sheriff on citizens protecting themselves, and he did the public service announcement. About how often does a 911 call lead to the police actually arriving while the crime is in progress?
Chief Carlson, you want to answer that? It's going to take a minute. I'm going to have to get off in the weeds just for a second, but that hits right close to home. Before I took office, it could be anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half or 2 hours. And even my first week in office, you can thank us having to arrest a jailer and get me sidetracked momentarily till we could get on it. But Chief Carlson and I have been working diligently to change the past protocol of the way calls were dispatched. And what I understand somewhat is that you may have 4 to 6 deputies out on the street. And if one, say, that's working Starville area around Winona is out on another call in that area comes in, they wait till he gets off the call instead of sending somebody from another part of the county. That's against all law enforcement 101. You get people, you prioritize calls, number one, to get people I'm going to just cut it short. We're going to try to get it down to, I can read you like a book. But anyway, is to get it down to, I would be happy if we get it down to 10 to 20 minutes, and that's just because we're rural. But in that same relation, Commissioner Nix and Commissioner Phillips and the other commissioners and the judge will be getting, in the near future, where we're wanting to go to a 12-hour shift for patrol. They are currently on 10-hour shifts when I came into office. 10-hour shift administratively is the worst shift for us to get coverage that there is. 8-hour shift's better than that. But I want to go to a 12-hour shift, which is going to allow us to go from 4 to 6 or 8 deputies on the streets of Smith County at one time to immediately go to 12. I'm increasing the supervision level, if I get the cooperation of the Commissioners Court, to 2, one north and one south of our north-south dividing line. That's to have the span of control and the supervision needed for each several deputies. And we're going to be able to cut our response times down to more than in half. But we finally, I think, Chief Carlson, haven't we got them? We get what we call a pass-on sheet at the end of every shift. We get it emailed to us. And I'll tell you right now, the lieutenant, the patrol commander, I've called him anywhere from 5 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the morning consistently, and as late as midnight at night. When I get through screaming, where I can tell him what the problem is. He has tried diligently to ask me to please change my phone number because I gave my phone number out during the campaign, and that is still my phone number. It will remain my phone number because as long as I can keep my thumb on the pulse of what's going on around the county, I depend on y'all to do that. I want to know what's going on. If I don't know what's going on, I can't fix it.
Sheriff,
Would you support?
really, Joanne, that was my question. The real question was,
I thought they stopped you from answering questions
I
asking
know.
questions a long time ago.
you know, the point of it is, if someone places a 911 call, here, anywhere, is the crime really over with by the time the police arrive?
I thought that's where you were going, Mac.
Repeat the question.
The question is the crime really over with, or is it not over with by the time the 911 call's placed and we get out there to, Mac, what I would prefer to do is our deputies at least make it out there before the body gets cold.
So you're saying, yes, the crime actually is over with?
Yes, usually. If you live out in the rural part of the county, I'm just like the sheriff from up there. You need to know how to use a firearm, but you don't need to have a firearm unless you're going to practice with it and unless you can safely use it. You need to know how to use it to protect yourself, protect your family, because we can't be there right when you need us. We have deputies and police officers here that get into trouble out here on the streets, you know, needing help. We can't even get to them fast enough. So, no, you need to take some things in your own hands and go ahead and get trained properly in the safe handling and the use of firearms.
Would you support a law that ended schools being gun-free zones because it's obviously not working?
Well, I would never support a law that would end it being gun-free by a criminal going through there, but law-abiding citizens that are, again, properly trained, or teachers that are properly trained, I don't think that's the first road we need to go down. I think first law enforcement needs to be allowed to do its job and get the resources necessary to do our jobs there. But as a last resort, I think with the proper training and education, and I don't have any problem with lifting that. But any criminal don't have any business with a gun anyway.
Sheriff, won't there be jobs lost if the weapons manufacturers can't manufacture the guns that Senator Feinstein wants to outlaw?
No, absolutely. There'll be all kinds of jobs lost, but I think even more so than that. I hope they don't quit manufacturing. They're not manufactured enough right now. The federal government has successfully so far, because of the Department of Energy purchasing firearms, ammunition, and Homeland Security and all these hoarding all the ammunition, we can't even order and get in a timely manner ammunition to qualify our deputies on the street right now. I tried to place an order for some patrol rifles, or at least check availability the other day. The Rock River 223 semi-automatic even is 1.5 years out from it that we ordered today.
Other than personnel, what changes do you plan to implement in the sheriff's office, other than personnel?
I don't think we have enough time to go over all those. But, I'll put it this way. After finally beat my head against the wall in my office up there, and they got some hard walls because it's in that old building up there with the thick concrete walls, I finally ran across a phrase that I'm going to put at the administration building of the sheriff's office, in each of the jails, and at the EOC out here, that says, if you keep doing what you always did, you'll get what you always got. And I can tell you, I'm not satisfied with what I had when I got into office, and I won't be satisfied until it gets fixed.
Your pledge to the citizens promised to provide constitutional training to your employees. What is the status of this program, and who will the instructor be?
Actually, I was hoping to talk to you about that and get the same one that y'all use here at Grassroots. Chris Ann, yes, is who I would love to get to do.
Can you pay her? Because she doesn't take any money,
Sure.
but that would be great.
We can use a drug fund to do that. Are you getting a cut or what?
No. Her work needs to get out, and if she gets some money.
But I do think it's important, Sheriff, for you to remind them the 2 books that all of your personnel were given the day they were sworn in.
Yes, ma'am. The 2 books they were given was the Holy Bible and a copy of the Constitution. So I guess you could say they're doing some at-home study right now in preparation for doing this. Oh, on that same note, too, we also have instituted a chaplain program. We already had one in the jail of the sheriff's office, but we now have one, thanks to Dr. David Dykes, who came to me and offered his assistance in starting a chaplain program. He is going to be the main chaplain. He's reached out. He sent me an email. I can't remember all the names. One of them, the only one I really remember because I know him, is Reverend Ralph Caraway, St. Louis Baptist Church here in Tyler. And there's 4 more that they're also going to provide counseling services and things of that nature for the sheriff's office employees and their families.
Why does Homeland Security and all these other internal departments of the federal government need ammo anyway? Ammo and guns anyway?
If I could answer that question, I'd be a Democrat.
Andy has a sense of humor. This is a statement. If my teacher told my mama I had ADHD, my mama would tell her it'd be cured tomorrow with no Ritalin.
And it would be more toward the suppository end than taking my mouth.
Do you feel like we can ever win the war on drugs when we can't even keep the drugs out of prisons?
The way I would have to answer that is even being with DEA, and you often heard them on the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock news talk about the war on drugs. The United States of America has never had a war on drugs. And until we do, you'll never win it. You got to have something before you can win it. You got to fight for something. If you want it bad enough, you'll fight for it. But we got to have to get everybody organized in order to do that.
Will you ever?
We will win the war on drugs in Smith County. I'll put it that way.
Will you ever allow checkpoints for DWI or otherwise to be set up inside Smith County? That's the first question.
I don't know that we'll do checkpoints. We will. I think they do some checkpoints during holidays. DPS does that. We do fully intend to assist them in those. What I am looking at doing, but I have to get everything else working properly first, because one thing is dependent on something else before we can start off in another project. And what I finally had to do with the command staff is, okay, give them one thing at a time. When you finish that, come back and we'll go to something else, because we were like a cat chasing its tail until we get some of these projects finished. So what I'm anticipating doing, a longer range plan, is to probably have 2 personnel assigned to a DWI enforcement project.
Number 2, can you speak on the constitutionality of no refusal weekends?
It is completely constitutional, because what it requires is you don't just go tie somebody down and take their blood. The constitutionality comes from the 4th Amendment, where due process, you have to show probable cause, number 1, and get a warrant. No warrant shall be issued but on probable cause is what the Constitution says. And that's the way they're doing it. They're getting a judge to sign the court order, which they have to submit an affidavit in order to get that warrant to take the blood from the individual. So it is completely 100% constitutional.
How was Fast and Furious gun running scandal able to be acted out by the ATF? Did not anyone in the ATF have the ability to stand up to their superiors?
Well, if you'll remember looking at, again, the 6 and 10 o'clock news, I can think of several agents right now that are labeled whistleblowers already. The lower level people did stand up to them. It's the upper level people that are put in there by the current administration. I think the last, ATF has not had anybody in charge for years. They never appoint anybody. It's usually handled by an attorney from, and I'm going to beg to differ with Jim when he's up here earlier. I don't mean to put the monkey on your back here, but you referred to Eric Holder as our Attorney General?
The United States Attorney.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I think y'all know where I'm going. But that's the people we've been getting to run that head up ATF, and that's what you have now. They have not had a director in years. And they're supposed to have one, but we can't even get a budget, so how are we going to get a director? So.
Sheriff, how are you handling illegal aliens who are arrested or don't have proper ID when questioned?
I know you're tired of me being funny, but the way I think Robert, Fred, how we would handle them is put them up against the wall with their hands, spread their feet, put the handcuffs on them, and put them in jail. Already in negotiations. Another thing that what President Obama's done that I just found out the other day. You have Title 19. Homeland Security has Title 19 and I believe it's Title 8 authority. Up until December 31st, they could cross-designate deputies or local law enforcement with Title 8 and Title 19 authority, Title 8 being the immigration portion of it. They did away with us being able to get deputized with Title 8 authority in dealing with illegal immigrants at the local level. So we can no longer do that, thanks to President Obama. But what has to be done with illegal alien now, they have to commit at least, I believe it is a Class B misdemeanor offense. And if you want them to be deported or if you want them to be taken by INS, you better, before you leave one side of the county on the way to the jail, call their office in Dallas and hope they come pick them up immediately, or otherwise they'll be bonded out and they won't place a hold on them.
Okay, we've got several that are similar, so I'm going to try to combine some of them. My concern is that the production of bullets will be so restricted that it will not be profitable to produce anymore. What are your thoughts on this?
I think you're exactly 100% right. They're going to be taxed to where people can't afford them or whatever. That they're already headed that way. I can remember just from duck hunting here a couple of years ago. From one year to the next, ammunition just about doubled. And if they're going after the ammunition, they're out here, the 223 rounds and stuff, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. We're talking about steel shot for hunting ducks, but why does all of it go up? But they're trying to tax it, or because the supply and demand has been handled by or altered by the federal government, Department of Energy, and all of them from buying so much. That's keeping a lot of people that can't afford it from buying them now. I've got plenty.
What happens if the federal government takes away the right for sheriffs to arrest people, or takes the office of sheriff completely out of local government?
That goes back to two separate sovereignties. They can't dictate what the state constitution says.
They can try, but let's see. We knew you would get this.
And I think the only way they did that in the other state we just talked about it because I think the vice president's son is attorney general there or something. Isn't that?
Would you support a posse or militia of citizens in case of a national emergency or disaster?
I know where that one came from. Once the emergency you see is going that way, I don't think we're there yet. And some particular individual that just, like Elvis just left the building, has been after me to do that. I don't think we're there yet. And what I finally had to tell him is, hey, I'm trying to get all this mess straightened out before I have to deal with y'all. I need to get my house cleaned up first.
Well, but one of the things that you did talk about during the campaign was having, for example, your public relations officer to work with community groups to be proactive on crime and that sort of thing, and bringing in more reserves, if I remember right.
Exactly. Bringing in more reserves is a way that we're going to go to. Also, that's going to work in many ways, but that'd be another way we can work on the response times, because if we have reserves that are able to put out there with one of our deputies as a two-man unit, and you're out here in New Harmony and you get a family disturbance call, they can send that one unit out there and don't have to send a backup from the adjoining zone that we have out there to leave that part uncovered. So we're doing things like that to make better use of our resources.
How do you see CHL holders being affected by this administration's crackdown on the Second Amendment?
I don't really see it being affected. Really, I think what you're going to see, I mean, we have to be vigilant, we have to be proactive, we have to not just sit back with our our heads in the sand. We have to do what we're doing. But I look for all this to blow over again, to be honest with you. But like you say, don't sit back and not do anything. But I look for it to blow over. I'll tell you, as far as from my perspective, not only from the concealed handgun licensing, but also as a local law enforcement officer and as a federal law enforcement officer, I'll even go one step farther. We're not even talking about machine guns or silencers here, but I'll go ahead and talk about that. That in my 35-year law enforcement career, I've not on one occasion, none, had to deal with or have any investigation pertaining to any legal owner of a machine gun or silencer, or as far as that goes, a concealed handgun carrying person.
This person says, "We appreciate you, Sheriff."
Thank you.
On guns and the protection of property, I think they were saying we appreciate you on those 2 points especially. Do you have a sense of the positions of other sheriffs and law enforcement officers across Texas and beyond on these matters in view of the direction of the federal government?
I do, and everyone I've talked to, and I've heard from many of them, you don't see them on the internet, you don't see them in the Sheriff Mack's website or anything like that, but they have the same opinion as I do. I've gotten phone calls from a lot of them. One of them that voices opinion just like I did is a great sheriff that's been there over 30 years, Terry Box in Collin County, wrote a very good letter. I wish I'd have written that one. I thought it was better than mine. But anyway, but all the Texas sheriffs, I think when it comes down to it, I'd be very surprised if you didn't have all 254 supporting and thinking just like we think.
And there are several, and it's not time to talk about it just yet because the deadline for filing bills in the Texas legislature is March the 8th, I believe, but there are several bills that have already been filed. There are some that are in the process of being filed. For example, Chris Patty from the Marshall area filed one this week for open carry. There will be duplication of bills, so what we're recommending is that, and they have to get out of committee first. But I think they will, because even liberal Republicans understand that they'd be really stupid not to support Second Amendment, pro-Second Amendment bills. Okay. Would you support universal background checks even though this is another way of registering firearms, after which registration there comes confiscation?
Well, a lot of people misconstrue what the ATF form, for instance, 4473 is. A lot of people think that's a gun registration. That is nothing more than a transfer record that tells us that gun was transferred from one individual to the next. And believe it or not, thanks again, another reason I am a member of NRA, that ATF form 4473 cannot leave that gun shop. It cannot be computerized for ATF to be able to research it or anything. If I wanted to go find out, if I have a gun traced by ATF, they can trace it to the manufacturer and the first person it was sent to. If I want to trace that gun to where it is now, I would do a forward trace, and it's all getting out and doing an investigation and tracking it from one place to the next. So there is no gun registration now. But on the other hand, if they're talking about individual transfer of firearms, I have a problem with the way they worded that, and I have a problem already because, again, I think we need to enforce the laws we already have on the books, and it's already against the law for Jesse, if Jesse here was convicted felon, to sell for Jesse to sell to Fred, if Fred were convicted felon, a handgun, even though he's an individual. It's already against the law. Use the laws we already have before you start making other ones.
Can I ask a question on that? On the forms you're talking about, if the ATF or the federal government said to all the gun shops that had these, now you have to digitize that and give all the information to us, how easy would that be for them to do?
I think we either need to do like they did in a tea party or have a big shredding party or a big bonfire.
If President Obama sends If President Obama sends AmeriCorps or U.S. troops or the United Nations to go door to door to collect guns, what will you do to protect us?
meet them at the county line.
We got most of the questions, and I promised you that we would have you out of here by 1 o'clock, because you have to go back to work for us. So thank you, Sheriff Smith, for being
All
here.
right, thank y'all.